Single father janitor protects millionaire's daughter from cruel stepfather. She's shocked by what she sees. Before the story begins, wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you. The 42nd floor of Sterling Tower gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway. At 34, his weathered hands told the story of countless late nights spent scrubbing floors and emptying trash bins to provide for his own 8-year-old daughter, Lily. The sound of expensive heels clicking against marble made him step aside respectfully. But tonight something was different. Through the frosted glass doors of the executive suite, he heard a small voice crying, not the typical tantrum of a spoiled child, but the desperate sobs of someone in pain. "Please, Daddy Richard, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to spill the juice." The tiny voice belonged to Emma Sterling, the 7-year-old daughter of Victoria Sterling, the youngest billionaire CEO in New York. Marcus had seen the little girl before during his cleaning rounds, always impeccably dressed, but with eyes that seemed far too sad for someone her age. "You clumsy little brat. Do you have any idea how much this carpet costs?" The harsh voice of Richard Blackstone, Victoria's husband and Emma's stepfather, echoed through the office. Marcus froze as he heard the unmistakable sound of a hand striking flesh, followed by Emma's heartbreaking wail. Every fiber in Marcus's being screamed at him to walk away. He needed this job desperately. Lily depended on his income for everything: food, rent, her medications for her chronic condition. Getting involved in the personal affairs of billionaires was career suicide for someone like him. But as Emma's cries grew more desperate, Marcus thought of his own daughter and knew he couldn't stand by. The office door wasn't locked. Marcus pushed it open to find Richard Blackstone, a man in his 50s with cold gray eyes, towering over Emma, who was cowering behind an oversized leather chair. Her small frame was shaking, and Marcus could see the red mark already forming on her cheek. "Sir, I think that's enough," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Richard spun around, his face contorting with rage. "What did you just say to me, janitor? How dare you interrupt a private family matter?" "I said that's enough." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Emma, his 6-foot frame creating a barrier between the terrified child and her tormentor. "She's just a little girl. She's my daughter, and I'll discipline her however I see fit." Richard's face was turning purple with fury. "You're fired! Security! Security!" But before anyone could respond, the elevator chimed, and Victoria Sterling stepped into the office. At 27, she was breathtakingly beautiful with sharp intelligence in her green eyes. But tonight those eyes widened in horror as she took in the scene: her husband's raised hand, her daughter's tear-streaked face, and the janitor standing protectively between them. "What's going on here?" Victoria's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that preceded a storm. Richard immediately composed himself, smoothing down his tailored suit. "Victoria, darling, this is just a misunderstanding. Emma was being clumsy again, and this employee overstepped his bounds." But Victoria's gaze was fixed on Emma's red cheek and her daughter's terrified expression. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Emma's recent nightmares, her reluctance to be alone with Richard, the way she flinched whenever he raised his voice. "Emma, baby, come here," Victoria whispered, kneeling down with her arms open. Emma ran to her mother, burying her face in Victoria's designer dress. "Mommy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make Daddy Richard angry." Victoria's hands trembled as she examined her daughter's face, her CEO composure cracking for the first time in years. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart, nothing at all." She looked up at Marcus, whose gentle brown eyes were filled with concern for a child who wasn't even his own. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for protecting her." Richard's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Protecting her? From what? A little discipline? Victoria, you're being ridiculous. This man just cost himself his job and probably his freedom when I pressed charges for assault. The only person who should be worried about charges is you, Richard." Victoria stood slowly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "How long has this been happening? How long have you been hurting my daughter while I was too blind to see it? Victoria, you're overreacting. A child needs structure, discipline. A child needs love and protection, not fear and violence." Victoria's eyes blazed with maternal fury. "Get out. Get out of my building. Get out of my life. And if you ever come near Emma again, I'll destroy you." Richard's confident facade finally cracked. "You can't just throw me out. I have rights. We're married. And tomorrow morning my lawyers will be filing for divorce. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings from our apartment, and then I never want to see you again." As Richard stormed out, hurling threats and curses, Victoria turned back to Marcus. "I don't even know your name." "Marcus Thompson, ma'am. I'm sorry if I overstepped, but you saved my daughter from a monster I brought into her life." Victoria's voice was thick with guilt and gratitude. "How can I ever thank you?" Marcus knelt down to Emma's level. "Hey there, princess, are you okay?" Emma nodded shyly, wiping her eyes. "Are you going to get in trouble because of me?" "Don't you worry about that." Marcus smiled gently. "Sometimes grown-ups need to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary." Victoria watched this interaction with growing amazement. This man, who barely knew Emma, had risked everything to protect her when Victoria herself had been too busy building her empire to notice her daughter's suffering. "Mr. Thompson," Victoria said formally, "I'd like to offer you a position in my personal security detail. The pay is significantly better than your current position, and, ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I don't need charity. I just did what anyone should do." "It's not charity. It's recognition that you have something invaluable, integrity and courage. Emma needs people like you in her life." Victoria paused, studying his face. "We both do." As Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies, Emma tugged on his uniform shirt. "Will I see you again, Mr. Marcus?" "I think you will, sweetheart. I think you will." But as Victoria watched Marcus walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something familiar about him, something that tugged at memories she thought she'd buried forever. Little did she know that Marcus Thompson held a secret that would change everything she thought she knew about her past. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful night, and Victoria Sterling's world had been turned upside down. The divorce proceedings were moving swiftly. Richard's history of gambling debts and questionable business dealings made it easy for her team of lawyers to ensure he left with nothing. More importantly, Emma was slowly beginning to heal, though she still woke up screaming from nightmares several times a week. Please like this video if you're rooting for Emma's recovery, and comment below about your thoughts on second chances. Marcus Thompson now worked as Emma's personal bodyguard and driver, a position that paid 5 times his previous salary. He'd been able to move Lily out of their cramped apartment in Queens into a modest but comfortable house in suburban Westchester, complete with a yard where she could play safely. For the first time in years, he wasn't working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. But the transition hadn't been easy. Victoria's elite social circle whispered behind their manicured hands about the inappropriate relationship between the billionaire heiress and her former janitor. The gossip columnists had a field day speculating about the real reason Victoria had hired Marcus, with some suggesting he was much more than Emma's bodyguard. On this particular Saturday morning, Victoria stood in her penthouse kitchen, attempting to make pancakes for Emma's breakfast. The results were disastrous. Smoke filled the air as the smoke detector blared. "Mommy, I think they're burning," Emma called from her seat at the kitchen island, giggling at her mother's domestic struggles. "I can see that, baby. Maybe we should just order room service again." Victoria frantically waved a dish towel at the smoke detector. The elevator chimed and Marcus walked in carrying groceries with Lily trailing behind him. At 8 years old, Lily was a bundle of energy with curly brown hair and her father's gentle eyes, though she moved a bit slower than other children her age due to her heart condition. "Good morning, ladies," Marcus smiled, taking in the chaos. "Having some culinary adventures, I see." "Daddy, Miss Victoria is trying to make breakfast again," Lily announced with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Is that what she's calling it?" Marcus winked at Emma, who dissolved into giggles. Victoria felt her cheeks flush. "I'll have you know I have an MBA from Harvard. Surely I can handle basic breakfast foods." "Different skill sets," Marcus replied diplomatically, already rolling up his sleeves. "How about I teach you? Emma and Lily can be our assistants." As Marcus took charge of the kitchen, Victoria found herself mesmerized by his easy competence. He moved with quiet confidence, explaining each step while keeping both girls engaged and laughing. This was a side of domestic life she'd never experienced. Her own childhood had been a series of boarding schools and nannies while her parents built their financial empire. "The secret to good pancakes," Marcus explained, letting Emma help measure the flour, "is not overmixing the batter. A few lumps are perfectly fine." "Really? I always thought everything had to be perfect," Victoria said softly. Marcus looked up from the griddle, and for a moment their eyes met. "Sometimes the imperfect things are the most beautiful." Lily, who had been quietly coloring at the counter, suddenly looked up. "Daddy, can Emma come play at our house today? I want to show her my dollhouse." Emma's face lit up. "Oh, can I, Mommy? Please?" Victoria hesitated. Despite Marcus's background check coming back clean, Letting Emma out of her sight still felt terrifying after everything that had happened with Richard. Marcus seemed to sense her anxiety. "You're welcome to come too if you'd like. It's not much compared to this place, but Lily's been excited about having a friend visit." An hour later, Victoria found herself in Marcus's modest suburban home, marveling at how warm and lived-in it felt. Family photos covered the refrigerator, handmade crafts decorated the shelves, and everything spoke of love rather than money. While the girls played upstairs, Victoria noticed a framed photo on the mantelpiece. Marcus, in military dress uniform, much younger, standing next to a woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. "That's Sarah," Marcus said quietly, joining her. "Lily's mother. She passed away when Lily was 3. I'm so sorry. She was beautiful. She was everything good in this world." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "Lily has her mother's heart condition. It's manageable with medication, but..." He trailed off, watching through the window as the girls played in the backyard. "Is that why you needed the job so badly? The medical expenses?" Marcus nodded. "Sarah's medical bills from her final years combined with Lily's ongoing treatment. I was drowning. That night when I stood up to Richard, I knew I was probably throwing away the only income I had. But I looked at Emma, and I saw Lily. I saw every child who needed someone to protect them." Victoria felt tears stinging her eyes. "You risked everything for a stranger's child." "She wasn't a stranger. She was a little girl who needed help." Marcus turned to face her fully. "The same way you've helped us. You didn't have to offer me this job, Victoria. You could have just fired Richard and moved on." "I couldn't just move on, not after what I saw. Not after realizing I'd failed Emma so completely." Victoria's voice cracked. "I was so focused on building my empire that I missed the signs that my own daughter was being abused in my own home. You're not the first parent to be manipulated by someone they trusted. Richard is a master manipulator. That's how he operates." "How do you know so much about his type?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Let's just say I've encountered men like him before." Before Victoria could ask what he meant, Emma came running inside with Lily close behind. "Mommy, Lily showed me how to plant flowers and she said I can come back next week to see if they grew." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." Victoria looked at the dirt under Emma's fingernails and the grass stains on her white dress, and for the first time, she didn't care about the mess. Her daughter was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. As they prepared to leave, Lily hugged Emma goodbye. "I'm glad you're my friend, Emma. Daddy says friends are the family you choose." Driving back to the city in Victoria's Tesla, Emma chattered excitedly about her day while Victoria found herself stealing glances at Marcus in the rearview mirror. There was something about him that called to a part of herself she'd buried long ago, a version of Victoria who dreamed of love and family, instead of just success and power. "Mr. Marcus," Emma said suddenly, "are you going to marry my mommy?" Victoria nearly swerved into the next lane. "Emma, that's not, we don't." But Marcus's response was gentle and thoughtful. "Your mommy is a very special lady, Emma. Right now, we're all just learning to be friends. Sometimes the best relationships start that way." That night, after Emma was asleep, Victoria stood on her penthouse balcony overlooking the city she'd conquered before her 30th birthday. For the first time in her life, she wondered if success without someone to share it with was really success at all. What she didn't know was that in his modest house in Westchester, Marcus was staring at an old photograph hidden in his bedroom drawer, a picture that would explain the real reason he'd been working at Sterling Tower that night, and why protecting Emma felt less like a job and more like destiny. 2 months into their new arrangement, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm for the unlikely extended family. Victoria had surprised everyone, including herself, by working from home more often to spend time with Emma. Marcus had become not just Emma's protector but her father figure, teaching her to ride a bike and helping with homework while Victoria handled business calls. But beneath the surface of their growing happiness, secrets simmered. It was a rainy Thursday evening when everything began to unravel. Victoria was reviewing quarterly reports in her home office when Emma burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy, something's wrong with Lily." Victoria's blood ran cold. She followed Emma to the living room where Marcus was on his knees beside his daughter, who was lying pale and motionless on the couch. Her lips had a bluish tint and her breathing was shallow and rapid. "I've called 911, Marcus said, his voice steady but his hands shaking as he held Lily's small hand. "Her heart condition. She's going into cardiac distress." Victoria immediately took charge, the CEO and her kicking into high gear. "I'm calling my personal physician. We'll get her to Mount Sinai. They have the best pediatric cardiac unit in the city. I can't afford Mount Sinai." Marcus said quietly, his pride warring with his terror. You don't need to afford it. I do. Victoria was already on the phone, using her connections to ensure Lily would receive the best possible care. The next few hours passed in a blur of ambulance rides, emergency procedures, and waiting rooms. Victoria found herself holding Marcus's hand in the hospital corridor as doctors worked to stabilize Lily's condition. She needs surgery, Dr. Jennifer Morrison, the head of pediatric cardiology, explained. It's a complex procedure, but without it, her condition will continue to deteriorate. The surgery alone will cost around $300,000, not including the extended hospital stay and rehabilitation. Marcus's face went white. Even with his new salary, that kind of money was impossible. Do whatever needs to be done, Victoria said firmly. Money is not a concern. Dr. Morrison nodded and left to prepare for surgery. Marcus turned to Victoria, his eyes filled with tears. I can't let you do this. It's too much. She's 8 years old, Marcus. She deserves every chance at life. Victoria squeezed his hand. Besides, what's the point of having money if you can't use it to help the people you care about? The people you care about? Marcus repeated softly. Victoria realized what she'd said, and her cheeks flushed. I mean, Lily is important to Emma, and Emma's happiness is important to me. But they both knew it was more than that. As they sat in the waiting room during Lily's 6-hour surgery, Victoria learned more about Marcus's past. He'd been an army medic in Afghanistan, where he'd met Sarah, a nurse working with Doctors Without Borders. They'd fallen in love in the middle of a war zone and married as soon as they returned to the States. Sarah always said that love finds a way, even in the darkest places, Marcus said, staring at his hands. When she got sick, she made me promise to keep believing that, to stay open to the possibility that love could find me again. Do you think she'd approve of this, us? Victoria asked hesitantly. Victoria asked. Marcus looked at her with surprising intensity. I think Sarah would love knowing that Lily has another mother figure in her life, someone who would move mountains to save her. The surgery was successful, but Lily would need weeks of recovery and ongoing medical care. Victoria quietly arranged for the best private room, hired round-the-clock nurses, and made sure Marcus could stay with his daughter without worrying about his job. It was during Lily's second week of recovery that Victoria made a shocking discovery. She'd gone to Marcus's house to pick up some of Lily's belongings when she noticed a box of papers that had fallen from a high shelf, probably knocked down by the cleaning service. As she bent to pick them up, a familiar name caught her eye. Emma Sterling Thompson. With trembling hands, Victoria examined the birth certificate more closely. According to the document, Emma's father wasn't listed as unknown as Victoria had always believed. It was listed as Marcus Thompson. The room spun around her as the implications hit her like a physical blow. 8 years ago, she'd had a brief relationship with a young soldier on leave. She'd been 20, rebellious and desperate to escape the suffocating control of her parents. When she discovered she was pregnant, her parents had forced her to give up the baby for adoption, threatening to disinherit her if she refused. She'd never known the adoptive family's name. Her parents had handled everything through lawyers and confidentiality agreements. But the dates matched perfectly, and suddenly Marcus's protective instincts toward Emma made heartbreaking sense. Marcus wasn't just Emma's bodyguard. He was her biological father. But why hadn't he said anything? Had he known all along? Was this entire situation orchestrated? Victoria's hands shook as she drove back to the hospital, her mind reeling with questions and accusations. She found Marcus reading to both girls in Lily's room, Emma curled up beside her new sister, while Lily listened with bright, recovering eyes. Marcus, we need to talk. Privately. Something in her tone made him look up sharply. He kissed Lily's forehead and followed Victoria into the hallway. I found this in your house. Victoria held up the birth certificate. Care to explain? Marcus's face went completely white. Victoria, I can explain. Can you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been lying to me from the beginning. You knew Emma was your daughter, didn't you? This whole thing, the job, the protection, getting close to us, it was all planned. No, it wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Tell me why you never mentioned that you're my daughter's biological father. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. I didn't know at first. When I started working at Sterling Tower, I had no idea who Emma was. But as I got to know her, as I saw her mannerisms, her smile, there were so many things that reminded me of myself at that age. So you did a paternity test? I had one done about a month ago. The results came back the day before Lily's medical emergency. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. A month ago. A month. Victoria's voice rose and she forced herself to lower it for the sake of the children nearby. How could you keep this from me? Because I was terrified. Marcus exploded, then immediately looked around to make sure no one had heard. I was terrified that you'd think I was trying to take her away from you, that you'd cut me out of both their lives. Victoria, I love Emma, but she's your daughter. You're the one who raised her, who shaped her into the amazing little girl she is. I didn't want to disrupt her life or make you think I had some ulterior motive. Victoria stared at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. But you do have an ulterior motive, don't you? You want her to know who you are. Of course I do, Marcus said quietly, but not at the expense of her happiness or stability. She's been through enough trauma. The last thing she needs is for her whole world to be turned upside down again. Victoria leaned against the hospital wall, feeling overwhelmed. This changes everything. Does it? Does it really? Marcus stepped closer. Look, I know this is complicated. I know it changes the legal situation, the custody arrangements, everything. But Emma is happy for the first time in months. Lily adores her, and we. He paused, struggling with his words. We've become something I never expected. A family. A family built on lies. A family built on love and protection and sacrifice. Marcus corrected gently. Yes, I should have told you as soon as I knew. That was wrong of me. But everything else, my feelings for you, my commitment to Emma, my willingness to put both of you before my own interests, that's all real. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to process everything. When she opened them again, Marcus was watching her with an expression of such vulnerability that it took her breath away. What happens now? She whispered. That's up to you. You hold all the cards, Victoria, you always have. Before she could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway of Lily's room. Mommy? Mr. Marcus? Why are you talking in the hallway? Lily wants to know if you're fighting. Victoria and Marcus looked at each other, then at the little girl who had brought them together in the most impossible way. We're not fighting, sweetheart, Victoria said softly. We're just working some things out. But as Emma returned to Lily's room, Victoria realized that the most difficult conversations were yet to come, and the revelation she'd just uncovered was only the beginning of the secrets that would reshape their lives forever. The week following Victoria's discovery passed in tense silence between the adults, though both tried to maintain normalcy for the children's sake. Lily was recovering beautifully, her color returning and her energy slowly rebuilding, while Emma remained blissfully unaware of the seismic shift happening in her world. Victoria threw herself into work with renewed intensity, spending long hours at the office to avoid confronting the complex emotions swirling inside her. But she couldn't escape the questions that plagued her. How long had Marcus known? Was their growing connection genuine or calculated? And most terrifyingly, what rights did he have as Emma's biological father? On Friday evening, Victoria returned to her penthouse to find Marcus helping Emma with her homework at the kitchen table while Lily, finally discharged from the hospital, colored nearby. The domestic scene struck her like a physical blow. This was what she'd always imagined a real family would look like. Mommy! Emma jumped up excitedly. Mr. Marcus is teaching me long division, and Lily drew you a picture. Lily held up her artwork proudly, a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. It's our family, she announced innocently. Victoria's breath caught. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Marcus cleared his throat. Victoria, we need to discuss Emma's schedule for next week. There's a school field trip on Wednesday and… Can we talk privately? Victoria interrupted, her voice carefully controlled. They moved to Victoria's home office, closing the door behind them. The tension was immediately palpable. I've been thinking about our situation, Victoria began, her CEO mask firmly in place. I think it would be best if we establish some clear boundaries. Professional boundaries. Marcus's jaw tightened. What kind of boundaries? You're Emma's employee, not her father. I think we both lost sight of that. Victoria's words were sharp, designed to cut. I'm grateful for what you did for Lily, but I can't have you thinking that gives you some special claim to Emma. A special claim? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you think this is about? You think I saved my daughter's life to gain leverage over you? I think you've been keeping secrets, and I think those secrets complicate everything. Victoria crossed her arms defensively. I need to know I can trust the people around my daughter. Your daughter. Marcus repeated the words with bitter emphasis. Right. Because genetics don't matter when you have enough money to erase them. The accusation hit Victoria like a slap. That's not fair, isn't it? 8 years ago, your parents forced you to give up your baby because she didn't fit into their perfect image of the sterling legacy. And now you're doing the same thing, deciding that I don't fit into the life you've built for her. That's completely different. Is it? Because from where I stand, it looks like history repeating itself. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. I've spent 8 years wondering about the daughter I never got to hold, never got to read bedtime stories to, never got to comfort when she had nightmares. And when fate finally brought us together, you want to reduce me to hired help. Victoria felt tears threatening, but she pushed them down. I'm trying to protect her. She's been through enough upheaval. And I'm trying to be the father she never had. Marcus's composure finally cracked. Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I don't lie awake at night wondering what kind of man I am for falling in love with the mother of my child while pretending to be just her employee? The admission hung in the air between them like a live wire. Victoria stared at him, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. You're in love with me? She whispered. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. God help me, yes, I love you, Victoria. I love your fierce protection of Emma, your vulnerability when you think no one's watching, the way you've opened your heart to Lily despite having every reason to resent her existence. I love the woman you are when you're not trying to be the perfect CEO, Marcus. But more than that, I love the family we've become, the four of us together. It feels right in a way I never expected after Sarah died. His voice cracked with emotion. Emma needs both of us, Victoria. She needs her mother's strength and her father's protection. She needs to know she's loved and wanted and worthy of sacrifice. Before Victoria could respond, there was a soft knock on the office door. Emma peeked her head in, her small face creased with worry. Are you fighting about me? She asked in a small voice. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances, both realizing how their raised voices must have sounded to the children. No, sweetheart, Victoria said quickly, kneeling down to Emma's level. We were just having a grown-up discussion. About me? Emma persisted, with the uncomfortable insight children sometimes possess. Marcus knelt beside Victoria, and she noticed how naturally he positioned himself as an equal parent figure. Emma, sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions about what's best for the people they love. Are you going to leave us? Emma's question was barely audible, but it cut through both adults like a knife. Victoria saw the fear in her daughter's eyes, the same fear that had haunted Emma during Richard's abuse, the terror of abandonment that came from a childhood filled with unstable adult relationships. No, baby, Victoria whispered, pulling Emma into her arms. No one's leaving. She looked up at Marcus over Emma's head, seeing her own realization reflected in his eyes. This wasn't about legal rights or professional boundaries, or even their complicated romantic feelings. This was about a little girl who had already lost one father figure to cruelty, and couldn't bear to lose another to pride and fear. Mr. Marcus isn't going anywhere, Victoria continued, making a decision that terrified and liberated her in equal measure. In fact, I think it's time we had a very important conversation about our family. That night after Lily had fallen asleep in the guest room and Emma was tucked into bed, Victoria and Marcus sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the city lights. The tension between them had shifted from anger to nervous anticipation. So where do we go from here? Victoria asked softly. I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've never been in a situation like this before. Two parents who fall in love after the fact? Victoria attempted a weak smile. Two people who have to figure out how to build a family from broken pieces, Marcus corrected gently. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching the traffic flow far below. I was terrified when I found out I was pregnant 8 years ago. My parents made it clear that keeping the baby would mean losing everything. My inheritance, my place in the family business, my entire future as they'd planned it. And you chose their version of your future over her. I was 20 years old, Marcus. I was scared and alone and completely unprepared for motherhood. Victoria's voice was thick with old pain. I told myself I was giving her a better life with a family who could love her properly. But you got her back. Richard's lawyers found out about Emma when she was 4. He convinced me that we could give her the life she deserved. The sterling name, the best schools, every opportunity. Victoria laughed bitterly. It never occurred to me that money and status couldn't protect her from the monster I married. Marcus reached over and took her hand. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? I was so desperate to prove I could be the perfect wife and mother that I ignored every red flag. I failed her, Marcus. Just like I failed her 8 years ago when I gave her up. You didn't fail her. You saved her. From Richard. from a life of abuse and fear. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. And you're saving her now by letting me be part of her life. Victoria turned to face him fully. Are you sure that's what this is about? Not some desire for revenge against the woman who gave away your child? If I wanted revenge, I would have told Emma the truth the day I found out and watched your world implode, Marcus said quietly. Instead, I've spent every day since then trying to figure out how to honor the life you've built for her, while still being the father she needs. And what kind of life do you want to build? For all of us? Marcus was quiet for so long that Victoria wondered if she'd pushed too far. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a hope so fragile it made her chest ache. I want Sunday morning pancakes and homework help and bedtime stories. I want to teach Emma to drive someday and walk her down the aisle at her wedding. I want to give Lily the sister she's already fallen in love with and show her that families can be chosen and created, not just born into. He paused, looking directly into Victoria's eyes. And I want to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Completely, honestly, without secrets or conditions. Victoria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. That's a beautiful dream. It doesn't have to be just a dream, doesn't it? I'm a billionaire CEO with trust issues and a tendency to put work before everything else. You're a single father with a sick child and more integrity than I know what to do with. We're from completely different worlds. So were Sarah and I, Marcus said softly. She was a doctor's daughter from Connecticut who spoke 3 languages and had never fired a gun. I was a farm kid from Iowa who barely finished high school before enlisting. But when we found each other in that military hospital in Kandahar, none of that mattered. Love doesn't care about differences in background or bank accounts. Love also doesn't solve practical problems. What happens when the media finds out about us? About Emma's parentage? My board of directors will have a field day with a scandal like this. Marcus stood up, his expression growing serious. Then maybe it's time you stopped living your life based on what other people think is acceptable. As he walked toward the door, Victoria realized she was about to make another mistake, letting fear drive away the one man who had ever put her daughter's well-being above his own interests. Marcus, wait. He turned back, hope and resignation warring in his expression. Stay tonight, Victoria said quietly. Not in the guest room, not as Emma's employee. Stay as the man I'm falling in love with, despite every logical reason why I shouldn't be. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was like sunrise after the longest night of the year. But neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the street, or the telephoto lens capturing every moment of their intimate conversation. Richard Blackstone had been biding his time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to destroy the woman who had humiliated him, and he'd just found it. 3 months later, Victoria's world seemed perfect for the first time in her adult life. Marcus had moved into the penthouse with Lily, and the 4 of them had become a genuine family unit. Emma called Marcus Papa Marcus, while still calling Victoria Mommy, creating a unique dynamic that somehow worked perfectly. Lily's health had stabilized with the best medical care money could buy, and both girls were thriving in their new private school. Victoria had even begun to relax her death grip on Sterling Industries, delegating more responsibilities so she could spend time with her family. She and Marcus were planning to tell Emma the truth about his biological connection to her on Emma's 8th birthday, just 2 weeks away. But Richard Blackstone had other plans. If this story is giving you chills, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments what you think Richard is planning. Victoria was reviewing quarterly projections in her office at Sterling Tower when her assistant Jennifer buzzed through the intercom with obvious distress in her voice. Ms. Sterling, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's urgent and personal. I'm not taking personal meetings today, Jen. Reschedule it. Ma'am, he says his name is Richard Blackstone. Victoria's blood turned to ice. Call security immediately. He says if you don't see him in the next 5 minutes, he's going to release some very interesting photographs to the press. Victoria's hands began to tremble. After their divorce, Richard had disappeared from New York, and she'd assumed he'd moved on to terrorize some other wealthy woman. Clearly, she'd been naive. Send him in. And Jennifer? Clear my calendar for the rest of the day. Richard walked into her office looking exactly as smug and dangerous as she remembered. At 52, he was still handsome in a cold, calculating way that had once fooled her into thinking he was sophisticated rather than sociopathic. Victoria, darling, you're looking well. Domestic life agrees with you. What do you want, Richard? Straight to business. I always admired that about you. Heard that? He settled into the chair across from her desk without invitation. I want my wife back. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. We're divorced, legally and permanently. You have no claim to me or Emma. Ah, But that's where you're wrong. Richard pulled out a manila envelope and spread several photographs across Victoria's desk. It seems you've been very busy since our divorce. New boyfriend, new living situation, very cozy family arrangements. The photographs showed Marcus and Victoria on her penthouse balcony the night they'd first kissed. Marcus teaching Emma to ride a bike in Central Park. All four of them at Lily's birthday party the month before. They looked like a family, which they were, but Victoria could already imagine the headlines. Billionaire heiress shacks up with former janitor. Richard's voice was silky with malice. Single father uses sick child to con wealthy CEO. Sterling Industries stock plummets as CEO's personal life spirals out of control. These photos prove nothing except that I'm in a relationship with a good man. A good man who just happens to be your daughter's biological father. Richard's smile was predatory. Oh yes, I know all about that little secret. Amazing what private investigators can discover when they're properly motivated. Victoria felt the room spinning around her. How did you find out? It wasn't difficult once I started digging into Mr. Thompson's background. Military records, adoption paperwork, DNA comparisons. It's all a matter of knowing where to look and having enough money to buy the right information. What do you want? I want you to fire your boyfriend and send him packing. I want you to release a statement saying that you've realized the importance of traditional family values and are seeking reconciliation with your ex-husband. And I want $50 million in cash transferred to an offshore account of my choosing. You're insane. I'm practical. You see, Victoria, I have two options here. Option 1. I release these photos along with the DNA evidence proving that you've been carrying on with your daughter's biological father while playing house with his sick child. The scandal will destroy Sterling Industries' stock price, damage your reputation permanently, and quite possibly result in custody challenges that could take Emma away from you entirely. Victoria's face had gone completely white. You bastard. Option 2. You play the repentant ex-wife. We remarry in a beautiful ceremony that restores both our reputations and I become the respectable stepfather figure that Emma needs. Oh, and Marcus Thompson disappears from your lives forever. I will never marry you again. Not if you held a gun to my head. Richard's expression grew darker. Then perhaps I should mention option 3. You see, I've done extensive research on Mr. Thompson's military service. Did you know he was involved in a classified incident in Afghanistan? Something involving civilian casualties that was covered up by his commanding officers? Victoria's heart stopped. That's impossible. Marcus would never. Wouldn't he? War changes men, Victoria. Sometimes good soldiers do terrible things and spend the rest of their lives trying to atone for them. I wonder how the media would react to discovering that the man you've entrusted with your daughter's safety has blood on his hands. You're lying. Am I? Are you willing to bet Marcus's reputation on that? His relationship with his daughter? His freedom? Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because I have documents, Victoria. Witness statements. Photographs from the aftermath. Whether they're true or fabricated doesn't really matter, does it? The court of public opinion doesn't require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Victoria realized with growing horror that Richard had planned this perfectly. He'd spent months gathering information, building a case that could destroy everyone she loved, regardless of its truthfulness. You have 48 hours to decide, Richard continued, standing up and straightening his tie. Fire Marcus Thompson, announce our reconciliation and transfer the money, or watch everything you've built crumble while the man you love gets destroyed in the process. After Richard left, Victoria sat alone in her office for hours, staring at the photographs scattered across her desk. In every image, her family looked genuinely happy. Emma laughing while Marcus pushed her on a swing, Lily curled up in Victoria's lap during story time, the four of them sharing ice cream at the zoo. How had something so pure become a weapon to be used against them? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emma's soccer practice is over. We're picking up pizza for dinner. Lily wants to know if you prefer pepperoni or mushroom. Love you. Victoria stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. In just 2 days, she would have to choose between protecting Marcus and protecting her daughter, between love and security, between the family she'd built and the empire she'd inherited. But as she looked at the photos again, she realized Richard had made one crucial mistake. He assumed she was still the same frightened 20-year-old who had given up her child to please her parents. He didn't understand that 8 years of motherhood had changed her, that love had made her stronger rather than weaker. Victoria Sterling had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. She had survived an abusive marriage and emerged stronger. She had protected her daughter from a monster once before, and she would do it again. But first, she had to tell Marcus the truth about the storm that was coming for all of them, because this time, she wouldn't face her demons alone. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Victoria told Marcus everything. He listened in stunned silence as she explained Richard's threats, his evidence, and the impossible choice she was being forced to make. "So he wants you to choose between Emma's security and my reputation," Marcus said quietly. "There has to be another way. There has to be something we can do." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. "Maybe you should take his offer." "What?" Victoria stared at him in shock. "Maybe you should let me go. Cut ties cleanly before this destroys everything you've worked for." Marcus's voice was steady, but Victoria could see the pain in his eyes. "Emma will be heartbroken, but she'll recover. She's young and resilient. But if we fight this and lose, she could lose everything. You, her inheritance, her future security. I won't abandon you. Not again. This isn't abandonment. This is sacrifice. This is choosing Emma's welfare over our happiness, just like any good parent would do." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. There has to be another way. If there is, we have less than 48 hours to find it. As Marcus held her while she cried, neither of them noticed the small figure in the hallway outside their bedroom. Emma had gotten up for a glass of water and had heard enough of their conversation to understand that her world was about to change again. But unlike the adults, Emma Sterling Thompson had a plan of her own. Emma Sterling was 7 years old, but she was no ordinary child. Growing up in a world of corporate boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations had taught her to listen carefully to adult conversations and understand the subtext beneath their words. She knew that the man who had hurt her before was trying to hurt her family again, and she wasn't going to let that happen. The next morning, while Victoria was at an emergency board meeting and Marcus was grocery shopping with Lily, Emma made a phone call that would change everything. "Sterling Industries, how may I direct your call? I need to speak to my mommy's assistant, Jennifer, please. This is Emma Sterling." "Emma, hi, sweetie. Your mom is in meetings all day, but I can take a message. Actually, I need Jennifer's help with something super important. It's about the mean man who used to be married to mommy." Jennifer's voice immediately became more focused. Victoria had briefed her on the Richard situation, knowing she might need all the help she could get. "What kind of help, Emma?" "I need Jennifer to find out about the pictures the mean man has, and I need her to call my grandpa George." George Sterling, Victoria's father, was a formidable man who had built the Sterling Empire through a combination of brilliant business sense and ruthless determination. He and Victoria had been estranged since Emma's birth, but Emma had met him twice at company events. More importantly, she'd heard her mother's phone conversations and knew that Grandpa George had resources that even Richard couldn't match. "Emma, honey, I don't think I should call your grandfather without your mother's permission. But Mommy won't ask for help because she's still mad at Grandpa George for making her give me away when I was a baby. But I think Grandpa George is sorry about that now, and I think he wants to help us." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, processing this surprisingly mature insight from a 7-year-old. "What makes you think that?" "Because he sends me birthday cards with money in them, and he always writes 'Love, Grandpa,' even though Mommy throws them away before she thinks I see them. And last month, when Mommy was sick, someone sent flowers to the house with no name on them, but they were white roses, which are Grandma Catherine's favorite flowers." Jennifer felt her heart breaking for this little girl who had figured out family dynamics that the adults were too proud to address. "Emma, this is a very grown-up problem. The mean man wants to take Papa Marcus away from us. He wants to hurt our whole family because he's mad that Mommy chose us instead of him." Emma's voice was firm with determination. "I won't let him do it. I already lost one daddy to meanness. I won't lose another one." 3 hours later, George Sterling walked into Victoria's office unannounced. At 68, he was still an imposing figure with silver hair and the same green eyes his daughter had inherited. Victoria looked up from her computer, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Hello, Victoria." "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Your daughter called me." George sat down across from her desk, his expression unreadable. "She seems to think our family is under attack." Victoria felt a mixture of anger and panic. "Emma shouldn't have bothered you. This is my problem to handle." "Is it?" "Because from what I understand, Richard Blackstone is threatening my granddaughter's security and happiness. That makes it my problem too. Since when do you care about Emma's happiness?" The words came out more bitter than Victoria had intended. George was quiet for a long moment. "Since I realized that my pride cost me 8 years with the most important person in my life." Victoria stared at her father, seeing something in his expression she'd never seen before. Regret, vulnerability, and what might have been love. I was wrong, Victoria. About the baby. About forcing you to give her up. About everything. I thought I was protecting the family legacy, but I destroyed the most important part of it. My relationship with you, Dad. I've been watching from a distance all these years. The birthday cards, the flowers when you were sick, the anonymous donations to Emma's school. I know you threw most of them away, but I kept hoping that someday you'd let me be part of her life. Part of your life. Victoria felt tears threatening. Why didn't you just call? Because I'm a proud old fool who didn't know how to admit he was wrong. George leaned forward, his voice growing stronger. But I won't make that mistake again. Emma is my granddaughter. You're my daughter. And if some pathetic excuse for a man thinks he can threaten my family, he's about to learn what real power looks like. Over the next 24 hours, George Sterling mobilized resources that even Victoria hadn't known existed. Private investigators, former CIA operatives, forensic accountants, and media specialists all began working around the clock to investigate Richard Blackstone's claims and build a counteroffensive. What they discovered was even worse than Victoria had imagined, but also far more promising. Richard's evidence about Marcus's military service was fabricated, created by doctoring real military documents and combining them with photographs from completely unrelated incidents. But more importantly, Richard's desperation for money wasn't just greed. He owed millions to some very dangerous people, and his ex-wife's fortune represented his only way out. He's been running a long-term con, George explained to Victoria and Marcus that evening. Multiple identities, fraudulent marriages to wealthy women, extortion schemes across 3 different states. This isn't personal vendetta. This is professional criminal activity. So what do we do? Marcus asked. George smiled, and for the first time, Victoria saw where she'd inherited her ruthless business instincts. We give him exactly what he wants. A very public confrontation. The next morning, Richard arrived at Sterling Tower expecting to collect his victory. Instead, he walked into a conference room filled with FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and enough evidence to put him away for the rest of his life. Richard Blackstone, Agent Sarah Chen announced, "You're under arrest for wire fraud, extortion, identity theft, and racketeering." As they led Richard away in handcuffs, he screamed threats and curses, but his power was broken. The fabricated evidence disappeared, the threatening photos became irrelevant, and the Sterling family was finally free. That evening, all 4 of them sat on Victoria's penthouse balcony, watching the sunset over the city. Emma was curled up in Marcus's lap, while Lily dozed against Victoria's shoulder. "So when are you going to marry Papa Marcus?" Emma asked suddenly, causing both adults to nearly choke on their wine. "Emma!" Victoria laughed, her cheeks flushing. "What? Lily and I have been talking about it. We think you should have a wedding so we can be flower girls. And then Papa Marcus can officially adopt me so I can have his last name too." Marcus looked at Victoria with raised eyebrows. "Thompson Sterling does have a nice ring to it." "Or Sterling Thompson," Victoria countered, smiling. "Are you proposing to me, Ms. Sterling?" "Maybe I am, Mr. Thompson." Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "Yes, and Grandpa George can walk Mommy down the aisle, and we can have the party at the big house in the Hamptons." Victoria looked around at her impossible, beautiful family. The man who had risked everything to protect her daughter, the little girl who had taught them both what love really meant, the child who had brought them together through her generous heart, and even her father, who was slowly earning his way back into their lives. 6 months later, Victoria Sterling Thompson and Marcus Sterling Thompson were married in a simple ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by their daughters, their friends, and a grandfather who had learned that the greatest legacy isn't built with money or power, but with love and forgiveness. Emma, now officially adopted by Marcus and carrying his name as well as her mother's, served as the maid of honor. In her speech at the reception, she said something that would become family legend. "Sometimes families aren't born together. Sometimes they find each other when they need each other most. My Papa Marcus protected me from the mean man. My mommy protected him from the lies. Grandpa George protected all of us with his power. And I protected everyone by asking for help when the grown-ups were too scared to ask. That's what families do. We protect each other." As Marcus and Victoria danced their first dance as husband and wife, with both girls giggling as they danced around their feet, Victoria realized that her greatest success had never been building a billion-dollar empire. It had been building a family worth fighting for. And in the end, love had indeed found a way, even in the most impossible circumstances, even against the most dangerous enemies, even when it required the courage of a 7-year-old girl to show the adults what really mattered. The Sterling Thompson family had learned that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, sold, or stolen. They can only be earned through sacrifice, protected through courage, and cherished through gratitude. And they lived not just happily, but courageously, ever after.